Thank you very much. Thank you, Mike, for the invitation. Thank you, Caroline, wherever you are, for getting me here. And thank you all of the amazing team for what amazing conference this is shaping up to be. I'm really happy for the welcome that you've given me. And I'm here to talk about the future of work. I just got to wonder, how many people are suffering from future of work fatigue? It seems to be everywhere. Talks, blog posts, videos, articles, so much about this topic. How much is it helping? We have a lot to engage with this. And, of course, the most important question for most people is not the future of work in general, but the future of their work, right? And what I find just about everywhere I go is that this is the number one thing on people's mind. What is the future of their job? Is it safe? Even among people, you would say they're safe. They're relatively immune. They have little to be concerned about in the future. This is still what's going on for them. And keynote speakers are not immune to this. And the arrival of ChatGPT had 3 impacts on my world. First, I had to explain many times why I and other keynote speakers and futurists had not seen ChatGPT coming, at least not so soon. Secondly, and most annoyingly, I had to change half of my slides. And third, I started asking myself a question before every talk that just about every speaker from that point on should have been asking themselves, which was, what answers can I give you that ChatGPT cannot? A serious kind of question. And I don't like this question. I don't like it because the answer is a list that keeps shrinking. Every day, someone wakes up at DeepMind or OpenAI or Anthropic and comes up with a way of knocking another thing off the list. This is not good for my blood pressure or my career prospects. So I did what any good politician would do. I pretended it was a different question. What can I give you that is better than answers? I like this. I like this a lot. Because it's easy to answer. I'm not giving you answers. It must be questions. Well, all right, we'll do some answers along the way, but the questions are going to be more important. And in retrospect, this is not surprising. This is because of the first question we're going to look at, which is, what is the difference between a human being and a large language model? Sounds a bit like, why is a raven like a writing desk? But it's a question that's vexingly hard to answer. Once you get past the trivial difference that one of them has a body and the other one doesn't, it looks like you're left with that shrinking list that I just mentioned, with one crucial difference. We command, the large language models respond. We request, they supply. We ask, they answer. We are the ones asking the questions. They don't respond until we prompt them. In a very real sense, they don't even exist until we ask a question. So we, the human beings, are the ones asking the questions. Now, I know you can ask ChatGPT to write 100 questions on every topic, and it will come up with those as fast as it can type them. That's not the same thing. That's writing questions. I'm talking about asking questions. See, when human beings ask questions like, how are diseases spread? How can we protect against infection? And how could we live longer? These are not just some strings of text floating out in the world. These change the world. We change the world when we live in questions. So if asking questions is what makes us human, then what makes us more human is asking better questions. So let's see if we can ask some good ones. I'm going to start out with one I already gave you, which is, why didn't I and other futurists see ChatGPT coming, at least that soon? And if I wanted to redeem myself on this a little bit, I would point out that in 2017, I wrote a book about AI that opened with a fictional chapter that was set in a future where the world was beset by a pandemic, evolving through multiple strains, and there were AIs that could have realistic conversations with you and write software to order. Sound familiar? Not bad, huh? Unfortunately, I set that in the year 2027, and I thought that was going out on a limb, so it doesn't redeem me that much. So let's look at this business of predictions. How do we use predictions? It was working. No, that's an intentionally blank slide. Sometimes, I know, I didn't tell you. Sometimes I have a blank slide because I don't have anything up there that's worth looking at more than me, so sorry. That's just one of those things. So let's start it with one I already gave you. Why didn't we see those questions coming? And like I said, it doesn't redeem me very much. So how do we use predictions? And this is where this should work. It was working. All right. There we go. Well, let's see. I did that with my finger. Let's keep going. So we make predictions, or we pay expensive consultants to make predictions, so that we can then make plans. I'm going to have to go over here now. Nope. I want to try it back up. And then we prepare ourselves to execute the plan. So, yeah. This one was...
That's a different one.
It did have... Okay, good. All right, fingers crossed. So maybe you look up the weather forecast for tomorrow, find out that it's predicted to be sunny, make a plan to go hike Connemara, prepare by doing a carbo load or brushing off your hiking boots. Then it rains anyway. Okay, so that's not a very consequential failure for prediction, but we make plenty bigger ones. See, it turns out that we suck at prediction. For instance, the physicist, all right, it's going to have to be, yep. Ernest Rutherford said in 1933 that splitting the atom, which two of his students had done the previous year, would never lead to any significant energy release, and anyone claiming otherwise was talking moonshine. This so annoyed Leo Szilard that when he read it, he figured out how to do it the same day. And in 1901, this gentleman said it would be 50 years before a heavier-than-air flying machine was built. 2 years later, Orville and Wilbur Wright were building them. This is Wilbur Wright. And he went on to say, this demonstration of my inability as a prophet gave me such a shock that I have ever since refrained from all prediction. Kind of an indictment of the whole prediction business. Smart man. And a little closer to home, 10 years ago, futurists were telling anyone who would listen, and quite a few people who didn't, that the jobs that would be safest in the near future would, one, be creatives, like artists, writers, musicians, poets, and two, experts in human emotional interaction, like therapists. Well, we know where that has gone. Not all writers, poets, therapists' jobs are going to be threatened, but some of them have already gone, particularly in the entry levels. Yet we continue to make predictions, even though we suck at them, because this process says we need to. Now, I submit that this has our priorities exactly backwards from what we should be doing most of the time. And we can see why when we look at these actions from the perspective of the future focus. See, prediction is a future focus on what will the world do. Planning is a future focus on what will I do. And preparation is a future focus on who will I be. And which one of these is most important? Which one, more importantly, do you have the most control over? I want us to break our dependency on predictions that mostly don't work anyway. I'm not saying we should stop making predictions altogether. In fact, they're essential to life. If I go to pick up this remote that hasn't been doing what I want today, as I go towards it, neurologically, my muscles are sending constant feedback to my brain about where my arm is, and when I touch it, my nerves give feedback at the same time, and if at any point along that attempt it doesn't match, then I instantly readjust until the predictions do match. If you go to pick up something, a hammer, and then you discover that it's a cake that someone made to look like a hammer, you have a sudden shock because the prediction didn't match, and then instantly you readjust, and everything's all right again. So predictions are vital when you get rapid enough feedback, and then they are useful. For longer time scales, we should be training ourselves to use this process instead, because it tells us how to ask better questions. So take a question like, what is the future of education? Just something I get asked a lot and we're dealing with in many schools right now. That's a good question, right? Must be, says so. But we don't want to settle for good, right? We want better. Where is this question in our process? Well, it's prediction. A better question would be, how do I plan for the disruption of education? But you're not going to settle for that, right? We're on a roll. So an even better question would be, who do I need to be in a future of disrupted education? And the important thing here is that now we have some agency. We have more control. We can do something about this instead of being at the mercy of the people making predictions. So agency is important, especially when we consider people who are outside the bubble of technology. I'm going to say that we here are all on the inside of the bubble because it's a technology conference, right? But there's a world out there of people who don't get it. And so even though we don't really know what's going to happen next with AI, even the people who are front and center of building it don't really know. And even when we're developing it, we don't have control of that industry. We feel on the inside. We feel like we have a say in the matter. We have chosen to be part of the technology game. But the people on the outside, the tech bubble, trying to make sense of a world where AI is magical and exploding, they are terrified. This is the thing that I need people in technology to understand the most, is this division. So those people feel like they're in the backseat of a car being driven 100 miles an hour down the motorway by some teenager who's chugging a Bulmers and turning around to yell, "I have no idea where we're going." But isn't that fun? See, to them, we are that teenager. That's the difference that not having agency makes. So let's try this question thing again. Okay, we got a lot of work to do to improve on this, so we'll come back to it. Let's talk about our visions of the future of work. We've long been chasing a particular vision of the future of work that looks something like this. And going back to the Jetsons, right? This is actually notable for the fact that the human being isn't doing any work at all, which I think is like an overreaction to our current situation, which looks and feels more like this. And the only real development over the last 50 years has been that instead of stacks of paper, we now have emails and instant messages and trouble tickets, which, since they don't have to fit on the desk, are even more. And so that makes us want to get as far away from this as we can. So we wouldn't mind if the robots were doing all of the work, right? So here's a really important question. Are we getting closer to our desired vision of the future of work? And the more we look at this, the more uncomfortable we might feel. Because we might not want to admit to ourselves that we've been moving in the wrong direction. What if we're getting further away instead of closer? Now, those of us in IT have long been used to spreading certain lies among ourselves, like, we're 90% done. I'll document it later. The code is self-explanatory, and of course, it works for me. Have you tried it, turning it off and back on, and so forth. We said these things often enough that we come to believe them ourselves. So it wouldn't be surprising that if we'd also gotten used to a certain level of self-deception about whether technology was actually giving us back more time. Now, let's consider the inventions of email, which created enough distance between us that we could assume that everyone was available all the time. Social media, which actually created more social distance. Word processors, which created the expectation that every document, no matter how trivial or mundane, would be perfectly formatted. And retail productivity, having automated just about the last task left. So where have we arrived at? So by a show of hands, how many people have enough time to do all of the things that you want to do? How many of you have enough time to do all the things you need to do? Put your hand up if you hope that one day AI will make it possible for you to do all of the things that you need to do. And the good thing about this is that it's telling no matter what the answer is, right? See, we've been pursuing something that's either not getting any closer or is actually getting further away. And you know, once upon a time, technology was the slower one in our partnership with it. It was like dragging a 3-year-old through an airport trying to make a flight. Come on, hurry up. Store my files faster, send my emails faster, dial my calls faster. But now the tables are turned. Technology has caught up. Now we're the 3-year-old. The faster it moves, the faster we move. The alarm goes off, you get up. The microwave pings, you eat. Siri says, time to go to work. You leave. The car says, turn left here. You do it. The phone rings, you answer it. Email arrives, you read it. Studies show that 81% of US employees read work emails during non-business hours. That the more technologically developed a country is, the faster its pace of life. That we are walking 10% faster than we used to 10 years ago. And over 40% of our day is spent multitasking. So where have we made machines that treat us like human beings, and where have we made them that treat us like API endpoints? It's all too easy for us to lie to ourselves about our productivity, but this is where we really need to be honest with ourselves, because if in our quest to have technology improve our work-life balance, if that's backfired, then what's going to happen when we try to improve it with AI, which accelerates everything it touches? What if instead of improving that work-life balance, it makes it far worse? What will we have committed? Which outcome would you bet upon happening right now? Look, I'm as invested in AI improving our lives as anyone out there. I want to be on the beach, right? I need that, and I want the robots to be doing that. And I believe that we can make that happen, but it is not going to happen by default. We have to make a change in viewpoint. So I'm worried that I am going to be instead trapped into doing things like updating my models for my agents or fixing interface bugs. By the way, this is what Star Trek gets wrong, because it shows a ship where everything works perfectly. None of the systems have any bugs. And if it was accurate, the scenario would be more like, Scotty, why have the engines stopped? Captain, I can't help it. The antimatter model update is incompatible with the helm control, a new version. It's doing a hard reboot. You don't expect a perfect accent here. But Scotty, there are Klingons coming. Captain, there's nothing I can do. The engine's running FS check. I was thinking I might want to see that episode, but on the second thoughts, it might be too close to home. So if you don't want to find out how much faster technology can force you to run around the hamster wheel, then we need to ask, how can we make AI that saves us time? I know we put our hands on our hearts and swear that, of course, our products save people time. That's why we're doing that. That's what they're for. But are they really saving time in one place only to take it away in another, like smartphones that give us the freedom to work from anywhere and the obligation to work from everywhere? Or are they saving time in execution only to take it away in life cycle cost, like cost to acquire, investigate, install, configure, repair, maintain, update, and then a hideous penalty if we should ever want to migrate to another vendor's version of the same product. Now, this becomes easier to answer if we take it on personally. As I said, I believe it's possible, but we can't expect it to happen automatically. It takes a collective shift in our viewpoint to make it happen. So we're not ready to come back to this question of the future of work yet. We'll leave that to the end. So the next question, when will we have artificial general intelligence? And how much ink has been spilled on this one, right? Yet, no one knows what bleep artificial general intelligence is. And yet they do want to stop, either have it straight away or stop it from ever happening at all. And there's no test for it, but every time someone does come up with a test that they claim would validate the presence of AGI, our current AIs learn how to pass that test and nothing else. And so we declare, well, that's not really AGI after all. So to recap, we haven't decided what AGI is. We don't have a test for it. The definitions for it are so vague that people often go outside of those and confuse it with artificial superintelligence, and now think that it's the point at which AI becomes godlike. Yet this doesn't stop pundits and forecasters from making specific predictions of when AGI will arrive, even though no one knows what a general AI system is. So we love nothing more than to argue about the meanings of words that have been tossed around for centuries without the slightest clue how we define them, like intelligence, and consciousness, sentience, self-awareness, free will, creativity, my favorite, understanding. And that would be all right. We could just leave those questions to philosophers to keep arguing about for another 100 years while we got on with real work. Except that almost certainly in the next 5 years, a court will be asked to decide whether an AI has one or more of these things. And courts, not usually as patient as philosophers. So let's apply our question transformation formula. When will AI become intelligent, conscious, all of those things, etc.? Good question, better question. What does all of that mean? Let's agree on that first. Even better question, how do we prepare for those things? Now, I know you can't realistically prepare for a future where court has decided that AI above a certain compute level is sentient, therefore entitled to human rights, therefore you have to get a court permission before you can even turn it off. No, there are people thinking about that now, but it's not a productive use of your time to join them. What will impact us more, though, is the level of public conversation about that escalating, as it will only continue to do. So maybe you want to decide that your AIs will remain narrow and never be part of that conversation. Or maybe you decide you want some first mover advantage and to move into that conversation and to develop and deploy emotionally sensitive customer service agents. Now, by the way, if you want an example of something that was a joke 5 years ago and is now a business plan, emotionally sensitive customer service agents. Now, all this talk about how we're going in the wrong direction with technology is kind of depressing. I only bring it up because it's true, but it still doesn't give us the agency we need to do something about this. So let me put another question out there. What are the limits to human understanding? While this is hard to measure, certain facts are inarguable. One, the demands on our cognition are increasing exponentially. Two, our brains ain't getting any bigger. For instance, the number of peer-reviewed papers doubles every 10 to 15 years, sooner in some fields. In fact, during the time I'm speaking to you, we can expect on average 20 papers in oncology alone to be published, which means that if you're a cancer researcher, you can either spend all of your time trying to just skim the abstracts alone of the papers in your field, or you can do, actual research. Because what's not going up is the speed at which human beings read. No question. What are the limits to human understanding? Good question. Better question. What could increase human understanding rates? Even better question. How can we use AI to do that? Now, there's a theory in philosophy called the extended mind thesis by Professors Chalmers and Clark. And basically what it says is that cognition isn't confined to what goes on in our brains. If we use some device in the pursuit of solving a problem, then we should consider that to be part of our minds. And when they came out with this theory, they used notebooks as the example of those devices because they were philosophers, not technologists, and plus this was 1998. Nowadays, we would say that, of course, the exemplar of that role is the smartphone. But that clearly hasn't been enough to help us understand scientific papers faster. All it's done is make it easier to generate them faster and inundate ourselves with them. And cognitively, for human beings, this is like trying to build a bridge across the curb with a wheelbarrow and a pile of bricks. We need the cognitive equivalents of helicopters and bulldozers and cranes. And just in the nick of time, along come large language models to provide understanding as a service. Now, we don't think of them that way yet. We're still stuck in this shiny thing phase, but this is what we have to do to deal with the flood of content that's just been accelerated, God knows how much, by the large language models themselves. We have to figure out how to use these LLMs as extensions of our minds in the same way that an expert piano player or tennis player uses a piano or tennis racket as an extension of their body. And there's one question that will come up over and over again around LLMs as they get closer and closer to embodying those qualities like consciousness and so forth, which will guide you through countless arguments, and that is, what's the difference between a convincing imitation and the real thing? This is going to show up whenever the question of does AI really understand something comes up. See, if we're talking about the difference between, say, almonds and imitation almond extract, well, you can taste the difference. Even if the imitation extract is so good that you can't taste the difference, you can detect the difference with, like, spectroscopy or something. Well, now suppose, instead of almonds, I'm talking about a chess game. I don't mean a board and pieces, I mean an actual game like Fischer versus Spassky, 1972, Game 7, the description of the moves that happened. That seems like an odd sort of thing, right? I mean, what you have then is either a perfect copy that's indistinguishable from anything else, or you don't have anything at all. So the question is going to come up, consciousness and so forth, are they more like almonds or a chess game? Now, it may not be phrased that way, but this is what that court will be confronting. Are those qualities computational/informational abstractions, Or do they depend upon some physical manifestation of some kind? We don't know. But if we start thinking about it now, at least we'll be ready for when that hits the world. So notice how I've come here as your guest and added to your workload because I've just tasked you with creating AI to be an extension of our brains because I figured you could use a challenge, right? But the meta question, as if this talk wasn't meta enough already, is the one thing that doesn't just separate us from AI, but makes us better humans. Is how can I ask better questions? Now we're ready to come back to the question we started with. What is the future of work? Better question. How do we want to live in the future? Even better question. Who will we become in the future of work? And this is where the question of how to prepare for the future of work is answered. Because that fear, that terror that I said exists outside the bubble, well, it comes inside the bubble too, through family, customers, other relationships. We're all connected. And preparing your business to deal with this has much more to do with the people than it does with the technology. Helping people surface their concerns, talking about the future, deciding what it means to be human in an age where the boundaries of that are being tested more and more. So this last question is really, who do you want to become in the future of work? And to tackle that like a human and not a large language model requires living in the question, developing it, taking it out into the world, adding meaning to it, living it, seeing where it takes you, and asking more questions, which would be my cue to see if you have any questions. Thank you.
Peter, thank you so much. I'm going to stand here, if that's okay, on top of your computer. And that was really, really fascinating. I have loads of questions. I'll put it to the floor first if anyone has any questions. I have a couple of my own. Does anyone have any questions you'd like to ask Peter? Okay, while you're having a think about it, I'm really interested in this idea that we can decide whether or not, or what type of AI we want, and you create the different types of AI depending on what sort of future that we want. But my understanding of all of this is that companies are competing with each other to get there first. At the moment, that's what's happening. Companies and countries are competing with each other to get there first. And in that rush to do that, do you think that the questions that you're asking are being asked? Or is everyone rushing towards sort of a predetermined outcome, which is to make everything go faster?
Well, that's a great question. Are we moving too fast? Are we not asking the right questions? And, you saw this played out at OpenAI when in the space of a week, Sam Altman was fired and brought back over precisely those questions, that the origin of the company was founded on respect for the safety of the process, and then there was a collision between that and the imperative to develop faster. So you could see quite well there that there was some divergence between people that wanted to go slow and people that wanted to go fast, just as we now have people saying that they want artificial general intelligence as soon as possible, or even artificial superintelligence, and others saying this is too dangerous to ever develop. So I think the question, let's develop the question and improve this, because it's not just, are we doing that? No. How could we do better? And then I think the real question is, who is involved in that? Because which body should there be that addresses those kind of things? And we've seen various things like the EU AI Act and presidential order in the US around this, and the UK's Safety Summit, but there's still no agreement on where the responsibility for handling this resides. Some people have called for an international agency, like an analog of the International Atomic Energy Agency. I think you can make IAIA out of that. Sounds snappy. But other people similarly disagree and think that that's the wrong analog. But I think the main question there is who should be answering that?
Does anyone have any questions? Yeah? Do we have a microphone? Yeah, just there in the middle there. Yeah. We'll get a microphone to you, I think. Just 1 second. It's on the way, or it might be handed over to you. Thank you.
Do you think Elon Musk is going down the right path then with Neuralink from your presentation?
Well, thanks for the question about brain-computer interfaces, because it's really important. And one of the things that's happened in the last couple of years is that we've actually built mind reading. That was done by studies not at Neuralink, but for instance, there was one study done using functional magnetic resonance imaging that was able to use AI to train itself so that when it looked at the signals from the visual cortex, it could reconstruct the image someone was looking at. There was another study done using electrocorticograms, which are kind of brainwave analysis, that could reconstruct an audio spectrogram of what someone was listening to. They used Pink Floyd in the example I saw. And another one was using electrocorticograms again to tell what words someone was thinking of. And this has actually been applied now in the use of that technology to help someone who's paralyzed, can't speak. Think Stephen Hawking. And now she can use this to animate an avatar on a screen to speak in real time from brainwaves. So, and that's where this is going, whether Neuralink gets there or not. We need that because we need to be able to interface with AI at a different level. But we also need it to interface with ourselves, because if you have that brain-computer interface, not only can you talk to the computer, but since the computer can now talk to someone else, like all of you, if we had that, then this talk would have been over in the first 30 seconds or so, because I would just go and it'd be done, which is mind-blowing and very science-fictional until you realize it's probably less than 30 years before we have that as an operational technology. So is it the right direction? It's an inevitable direction, is the answer to that. And it's my hope that that is what leads to bringing people together more than we're currently dividing ourselves.
Wow, I thought Geoffrey Hinton was dystopian, but there we go. Does anyone have any other questions? Yes, over there, yeah.
Okay. Thank you for a very interesting talk. I love the idea of your elements and your chest moves when you were talking about consciousness and sentience and the fact that courts will have to decide that. But I guess I'm surprised by the question you posed, which is it chest moves or is it elements? Is it that subtle question? Maybe I'm missing something, and I guess that's my question to you. What am I missing? Because it seems to me that consciousness, sentience, these things are really subtle. To me, the answer is they're elements. But the fact that you posed the question leads me to believe I'm missing something in that. And I wonder, could you expand on it?
Right. Thank you for the question. So what is the essential question around these qualities that are what we use to say we're uniquely human? We are conscious, intelligent, creativity, self-awareness, and so forth. And creatures that don't have that are less so. And it's important to understand this because we attribute rights to creatures that we believe have these. And if AI is said to acquire these, then that would be the next step. But the fundamental debate that happens when we look at AI, like today's AI would pass the Turing test, right? We know that the Turing test was set up, was hypothesized by Turing to say if you can fool people into thinking that you're a human, then we should consider that you're thinking like one. And we just kind of forgot all about that because AI would pass that now, but it's not really the right question to ask in determining whether AI is conscious, because if it were, it would know that it was AI, not human, and so it wouldn't be trying to fool us that way. The thing that the fundamental issue here is people ask, is AI understanding, which is a stepping stone to, is it conscious? And a lot of people say, well, no, it's not. And the reason they give for that boils down to it's not biological, or it's not human. It's not made of the same stuff we are. And I guarantee this is what you'll hear from the arguments around this. It boils down eventually to that. Well, that is, it's not speciesist. I think it's sort of substratist argument. Why shouldn't silicon work? But what we lack is the way of telling whether something is conscious. And people always say, well, I have conversations with philosophers where we trot out a question they're used to, which is, how do I know that you're conscious? And they go, yes, you can't. And then I say, how do I know that I'm conscious? And that's one they usually haven't thought about. But all of those qualities, how do we tell from the outside whether something has them? We don't have any useful tests for that. And that's where the question of, well, is it a chess game or is it almonds comes in. Is it something that exists independently of what it's running on, or can it only be attached to a physical body of some kind? And we just don't know. Even though there are so many people that believe essentially what we call substrate independence, that the mind is the software and the brain is the hardware, therefore you should be able to move the mind to another piece of hardware somewhere. This is the whole principle of uploading your mind. But that runs into the question of identity. So we've gotten, really way out on a limb here philosophically, but that's where that question takes you. That's why there's that disagreement.
Well, I'm sorry now we don't have time for any more questions. I'm sure you do have more questions, but maybe you can speak to Peter at the break or something like that. Peter, thank you so much. I think a huge round of applause for Peter. Thank you.